Good morning.
Jenny White back live again. Here we go.
Well, we're both back live. I mean, we haven't been live for a whole week. It's so nice to see you and everybody. It's like, it's nice. Oh, Lisa's already on. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Lisa. How are you? Hope you're feeling better. Bless Lisa's heart. Yeah, I'm wearing my Salida, Colorado shirt because it's this beautiful rose pink, and I've decided that's my color or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it was even though I left a child in Fort Collins, which was sad. It really was a nice trip. I mean, the weather was really great. You forget when you're in the mountains, when you're up there, it's like chilly. It's nice.
It's not chilly.
It is. I mean, you get up and it'd be like you'd have to put on like a sweatshirt or something. It was nice.
Outside of me wrecking your trip with sending you this AI video and some other videos.
Yeah, you need to leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Stop trying to make me know what's going on. I don't want to know. Ignorance is bliss. Have you never heard that before?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I thought that was, yeah, ignorance is bliss, man. What is that? Stop harshing my mellow.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I keep getting so much stuff and reading so much stuff about AI, and it's, and then before we came on, you and me and Charles were talking about how, anybody can do anything they want on your phone, and it's just
well, and just think, Jenny, the surveillance, the technology and surveillance is literally probably so advanced we can't even really comprehend everything that they can do and see and all the data they have on us. I mean, it's probably just light years from what we can even imagine.
And we don't want to. I'm pretty sure. I mean, even you don't want to know what they're doing. I mean, it's awful. It's just, it's so crazy when you think. Well, I mean, oh my gosh, it's just sometimes you really think about what's going on in the world today, and it is not, I mean, we've talked about this 100 times. It's not like when you and I were kids. It's just not even sort of the same. I mean, Dave and I were laughing the other day about that we would come home from school and there was one day a month or something, they'd have the after school special and you'd run home because there was one thing you could watch on the television. It would be like, I'm not talking to you, man. I got to get home and watch the afternoon special, and now it's this all the time.
Yeah.
It's
but in that vein of ignorance is bliss, that's what the government counts on. The government counts on us not asking questions, not paying attention, not following through. That's what they want. They want us, little automatons playing video games and all the BS, social media, on your little tracking device that you have in your hand there.
I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention again because you never know who's listening. But I think, everybody says 1984, George Orwell. You got to go read 1984. Well, yeah, there are some parts of 1984 that are just so, like spot on. You just feel like he was some kind of prophet or something. But Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit, what is it? 451, Fahrenheit 451, to me was the closest to where we are now, because he talks about, they put they're called seashells in their ears, and they can hear, their programming, and the television is always on, and, they can't read books anymore. Books are bad. You can't read it. And that's what Fahrenheit 451 means. It's the temperature that books burn. And if you have a book, an actual book, they come and get it. The police come and get it, and the firemen come and burn them all up right there. And you look at the way we're going right now. How many of our students are not using books?
Yeah. I'd say the majority.
See, I think we're in Fahrenheit 451. We're not, we're sort of in 1984, but people who are thinking people really, really need to read Fahrenheit 451, because I just think I think we're so much closer there, and it describes so many things better where we are right now than even 1984 does. But we got to get people waked up.
Well, and besides not even reading actual physical books, but what about not even having the ability to read because you just consume so much video and audio content on top of it?
Well, I was just talking to a former teacher yesterday, and she said that she was absolutely shocked, more disgusted, but also shocked that the kids that she was coming into contact with could not read cursive. They not only could not read cursive, they had no idea how to write it, and they couldn't. And so she was having to, it was a mom, and she was saying, I have to read all of when my mother writes my daughter letters, I have to read them all to her, because she has no idea how to read and write in cursive. And what are our founding documents written in? Just
well, if you actually read the original, you're not going to even be able to read the original, because you can't even understand a cursive A.
Nope. Childhood's End did it for me. The idea that something is over as for 50 years before the government decides to reveal it freaks me right out. I haven't read Childhood's End, but maybe I need to do that one. Hi. Of course it's going to be a great show today. And we're hoping to get the whole show done this time, right?
We will.
But Charles has disappeared. So as soon as he comes back, my kids can read it and write it, and they've prefer print.
Good.
You have boys, Michael. Wendy has 2 boys. I have 2 boys. Michael, you have like 100 boys. They don't want to write they want to write in this weird block script.
Yeah.
What's the matter with you people? It's got to be something on a chromosome. Stop it. All right. Well, we've been jacking around this morning long enough. We need to bring in our guest so that we can finish talking about the Oklahoma City bombing, because we have an authority on the Oklahoma City bombing. I think haven't you written the definitive, Charles?
I believe so, and that's what a lot of people think.
Yeah, I think so. So I think you are the authority, the expert, the authority. So how are you today, Charles?
Very good. How about you guys?
Great. I bet you've already been to the gym this morning.
No, I didn't make it to the gym this morning.
Oh, that's a shocker.
I did a Did a little workout at home.
Oh, hey, very good. I didn't make that this morning. So,
Well,
what about you, Michael?
you got to take a day off every once in a while.
I was working early this morning, not working out.
Yeah, and I've sort of taken a whole week off. So I need to get back on it. All right, so let's kind of start where we left off. But I do want you to talk just a second about what we were talking about before we went on. We were talking about Tucker Carlson, and who did Tucker Carlson have on?
He had a journalist and writer, author named Margaret Roberts, and she wrote a book about the bombing. She interviewed me and a ton of people, and so it was pretty interesting. It's probably one of the best interviews from somebody that might be considered not Tucker, but her mainstream, because there's been a number of other books written, but they're basically just, rubber stamping the government's story. So it's frustrating from my perspective. One of the first things I could say, it's frustrating to watch all this go by for 30 years and see how people react to it and who they talk to and who they don't and blah, blah, blah. So it's real frustrating to watch something like that and think, what's the problem with talking to me? Just to be real blunt about it. Why can't you interview me and learn some more about this? And I guess it's probably being an ex-legislator, quote, politician, things like that. So they covered quite a bit.
See, I don't know that that's true, because I remember when we were working together, when I just got involved in politics and just kind of was getting out there. And I remember, because we were working on for people who don't know, we were working on a bill to increase social studies standards in Oklahoma long before, Ryan Walters even brought that to the forefront. And I would go places or read something that journalists had written about that bill, and they constantly rubbed your nose in the dirt. And the conspiracy theorist, they would constantly call you that. I mean, they were just mean, about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think right there shows that you were over the target, because they had to demonize you and, get you out of the narrative.
Well, in this interview, Tucker did a pretty good job of digging into and continuing to bring up the anomalies, the unanswered question. So they went through the government story, and then she tacked in things along the way, which I've talked about on this interview. The first one, I think, I don't remember everything we talked about there, but I think we covered the point, because I make a point of this. I'm really the one that picked this out. And I think she got this largely for me, although one can glean this from looking at the evidence. And I'm focusing it on the Elliott's body shop and rider rental place there in Kansas, where he got the truck. And so the question at the time in the interview, and always when one looks at this, is when did they change the narrative from McVeigh and a John Doe number 2 that drove the truck, that pulled the truck up, that was seen here, there, and all kinds of places, including in that body shop? When did they change it to, it was a mistake? People misread, misunderstood, and McVeigh rented that truck by himself, et cetera, et cetera. And so they at least covered this, but the answer is, and people may remember if they haven't watched that previous one, is that I remember it very clearly, because we were fortunate enough to have people come and give us donations to the organization that we created. And we hired multiple investigators, and she was friends with one of those, which I'll bring up in a minute. So you had this one investigator that was out there working for us, and we were getting, on the spot information all the time. Plus I went up there a number of times myself and interviewed and talked to people myself, like the ones that were at the Dreamland Hotel where McVeigh stayed, et cetera, et cetera. So the short answer to this is that McVeigh comes into the rider shop. They have like a little 10 by 10 cubicle where they do all their transactions. The person that owns it is named Eldon Elliott, Elliott's Body Shop and Rider Rental. His manager, the one that does really all the business there, is the business side of it, is a woman named Connie Beamer. And they're the ones that did the transaction when McVeigh walked in. So it's a little bitty office anyway, and a little bitty 10 by 10 cubicle. They walk up, do the transaction. The FBI, there was one guy that sat in that cubicle. It was a mechanic. He was taking a break at that time when McVeigh and the other guy came in. And so they're interviewing the FBI, they're interviewing the three people. And Eldon and Connie were really adamant about what they saw. They were clear about it. The FBI kept asking them to do a second, third, fourth interview, et cetera, et cetera. They were really not just frustrated, they were angry about it because they said to us and others, it sure seemed like they're trying to get us to change our story, because they kept saying, you sure it was, he had somebody with him? And then they finally said, and here's the real key point. They said, well, would the three of you go under hypnosis to see if we can explore some more and find out? Which Eldon and Connie said, absolutely not. We don't need to go under hypnosis, and we're not going to do it. They talked the other guy into it. And after they did that, the next day they came out with headlines. We found out what the deal is. It was a mistaken identity case, blah, blah, blah. That's a real important thing, because obviously McVeigh was seen with many others that they used in their own court preliminary hearing and in the federal court in Denver. They used other people to show McVeigh was here and there, and they always had somebody with him. There was always somebody with him from the witness's perspective. So you got this big problem, and you've got, back to the Tucker interview, they're talking about anomalies. Another one that I was a little surprised they brought up, and she went into more detail, is she said, there's these articles that were written by Baltimore Sun and New York Times and some others, in which they reported that McVeigh had told his sister and other family members and a inmate that was in prison with him when he was incarcerated and going to be executed, told them that he was working for the government as an undercover kind of person. And those articles are out there, back to things that we forget and we don't remember, or maybe we never heard it because we weren't paying attention. So she dug in a little bit deeper. There's a lady named Wendy Painting, wrote another book on the bombing. I've met her, helped her a lot in the years past, et cetera, et cetera. She went at it from a real kind of, I'll call it an academic point of view. She dug into Stephen Jones' records, which the defense team had a ton of records. They put them down in the University of Texas. I believe it's in Austin, and it might be in the Dallas area at another campus, but they make them available to people that want to go in there and study those. You have to be approved and all that kind of stuff. You have to be legitimate. So she has done that in those records. This is interesting because I had heard and know some things about this. McVeigh gets identified in Perry, Oklahoma, because of a traffic violation. This was right after the bombing, the same day.
Yeah.
They're able to identify him. They go get him. They fly him down to El Reno Penitentiary to have that preliminary hearing. There are two attorneys assigned to him. So you guys might recall this name, John Coyle.
Yes.
Still yet today, one of the top defense lawyers in our state, well known. And another lady named Susan Otto. I think she changed her name to Graham, got married or something like that. Those are the two attorneys for McVeigh. They quickly got off the case because they had their reason, and it no doubt legit. They had too many friends and colleagues that were either killed or hurt in the courthouse and this, that, and the other. So they felt like they were biased. But in those court records that Wendy Painting, the author, dug up, they talk about what did McVeigh say to them in those very early starting points. He said he was working for the government, some words to that effect. He was doing domestic covert work with the government. So when we get back to all the whys, it's always been interesting to me of how we look at it. And we really start with the government's case, and we always go back to the government. Well, the government's this, they discovered that, blah, 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 blah. And we really operate on, I watch these journalists and everyone, all of us do this to some degree from time to time. We let the government be the source and the guide for for practically all things. We know that our friends and neighbors, people we go to church with, they're not going to believe nothing until the government comes out and says, yes, there's UFOs
Yeah,
or whatever,
it's true.
whatever the subject is. So I
Yeah.
go back to this because the problems in the Oklahoma City bombing case is the facts. Many facts show that the government's case is not only wrong or off, it's completely wrong. They're covering stuff up. We know they are. And I think I talked in the last interview about the congressional staffer that worked, wasn't just a staffer, he ran the office for one of our congressmen years ago. I stumbled into this talking to this person's sister, and I said, well, he knew some things that he told the family members. You remember this story? Anyway, he says, I asked the sister, who was a mature woman, professional person, I said, ask him if he'll meet with me privately, confidentially. I thought, well, that'll never happen because everybody knew who I was and what I was doing at that time. It's all over the news. He did meet with me. We went and talked, and he's the one that said, I had a conversation with an assistant DOJ and an assistant ATF. In his capacity, he interfaces with those people somewhat regularly. And he said, he brought up the bombing and said something and asked some questions about it. And they said, well, look, the genesis of the bombing was a fake sting operation that was put together after Ruby Ridge and Waco to make the ATF look good, blah, blah, blah. He said, what? They repeated it. Well, when he told me the story, I did the same thing. I said, well, wait a minute, let me get this straight. How did they say it? Is that how they said it? He said, yes. They said the genesis of the bombing was this fake sting operation. So in light of this Tucker interview and a official mainstream longtime journalist, I think she worked for New York Times at one time and stuff like that, has come out with more of this type of information about the bombing. 30 years later, like the JFK, like so many of these other cases, people feel more comfortable coming out, talking about it, especially if you're in the profession of journalism and media. So I think what we have here is and I've got the document, I think I sent it to you guys, which is an FBI field report document. It says Federal Bureau of Investigation at the top. Has a lot of redactions in it, but it's an agent reporting to a higher up saying, yeah, I've looked into this stuff and da-da-da-da-da. Apparently he was charged to do something. So this isn't in the course of the bombing. This is after. That's it right there. And he says it was a fake sting operation. So here's the government giving a little report, internal report, admitting that they created a fake sting operation.
So Wendy's got a question, and it's my question too. So I'm going to interrupt you and throw it up. A fake sting operation, does that mean it was never supposed to happen? Or was it supposed to happen, but it was supposed to be fake? How does that work?
We don't know. And this is something I've learned to say frequently, very liberally. When you don't know something, you don't know. But
yeah,
I think it was a fake sting operation from the very beginning.
But what do you mean fake?
Like, they made it up. They made it up to give the impression that they were actually tracking bad guys that were going to do something like this.
Well, how in the world did it get that out of control that it killed people and blew up a whole dang building?
Well, I hate to keep saying it, but we don't know the detail of that. But we're getting closer by continuing to look at this. Here's what I think, and it's been speculated by others that have followed this point where we're on right now, is that McVeigh or the John Doe, became one of the ones they were trying to blame this on, a bunch of radical right-wing whatevers. And they changed the deal later because one of the other things that McVeigh allegedly in the court documents, this I just referred to some, said is I didn't think it was going to be that big of an explosion, or I was surprised it was that big of an explosion. So we don't know the detail of that, but it's clear they were willing to allow this to develop to that point in a heavily populated downtown area in the middle of the week, right when people are busy doing life.
Now, you're saying the government was willing to allow that whole thing to play out, correct?
Yes. So the government was behind this. And here's another important thing. As I was watching that interview this morning, you kind of go back and forth, back with the thinking, like I just mentioned. The government said this, the government hadn't said that yet, so we don't know until the government says.
Right.
And we go back and forth, and then we look at something like we're talking about now. Look, this was everybody in the FBI. This is another thing that confuses us, because we'll say the government did it, or the government this. Well, the government actually didn't do it. Some people in the government did it. So did all the FBI know that this was going on? No. And you can see that from looking at the investigation. All the agents that were out there investigating this, they didn't know there was a sting operation. The guy that wrote that memo, he probably didn't know it until he looked into it and found some people that would corroborate that and then discovered it. So you've got both. And if it were something that they wanted to be, they were willing to let it be more widely known within the FBI. If you're covering your rear end, this is what I would think about doing. I would think about continuing to have a, public investigation going on out here and follow that course, while over here you're trying to cover up these things that would indicate you had complicity in this happening. So we discovered some of that as we were doing our investigation. In that big report we've got agents that we call out in there that wouldn't do their job, that were, helping actually in the cover up. Now,
so Wendy says, sorry to interrupt again. Was it supposed to happen then with some patsy to blame? That's a false flag, right?
Well, see, and we want to know this. I want to know this. So
you still don't know this.
Well,
so was McVeigh, in your opinion, was he trying to play more of a patriotic role, like infiltrate these bad guys and go through the plan, like he's working with elements of the government, or was he truly a bad guy that was just in this deal?
No, I think it's clear from this information that I just brought up, it's clear he was working for the government. Now, did he change and decide, these guys are rotten and full of crap and they're the bad guys?
Yeah.
So I'm going to let this bomb go off. Or did they think it was not going to be a huge explosion? I mean, you still want to think, Frank Keating did this to us in opposition to what we were doing early on. He made 2 or 3 public pronouncements that were disparaging to me and us. And he said, these people are howling at the moon. And then another time he said, I can't believe, he was really saying, how can these people say this? He was disparaging us. He said, I can't believe the government would leave those people, the daycare and all the people there, to just be slaughtered at the hands of somebody like this. See, we were talking about prior knowledge at the time. When you talk about prior knowledge.
But that is, you got to admit it, that's a tough pill to swallow, Charles. I think that's the reason why so many people put these blinders on and just say, it can't be the government, it can't be the government. Because how could people that you elect, who then in turn have hired and appointed these people who would kill children in a daycare? I think, to me, that's the whole reason why we can't seem to get to the bottom of it, because people can't wrap their heads around that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, do you think, Charles, did Keating and like Edmondson and those guys, they didn't have prior knowledge of that? Do you think?
Yes, was this they did.
Like a rogue element?
Really?
Sorry. Think about the Black Forest story that I think I told last time, where VZ Lawton, a survivor of the bombing that was part of our Oklahoma bombing committee, went over to Germany, blah, blah, blah. And he happened to run into, while he was on a little tourist John on the Rhine River, and they had a dinner meeting. He's sitting at a table with some other people, Americans. And the lady says, she goes, oh, well, that's why we got that call. Because he was telling the story about being in the bombing. She goes, oh, that must be why we got that call. He said, what call? She said, well, we got a call either the day before or 2 days before, which would be Monday or Tuesday before the Wednesday bombing, that was inquiring. A person identified themselves as, I'm a congressional staffer working as a liaison with the governor of Oklahoma, and we're inquiring. This is into Walter Reed Army Hospital, where she worked, in the unit that specializes in this. Believe it or not, they've got a unit in Walter Reed Army Hospital that specializes in blast wave overpressure treatment. And they said,
that makes sense. Yeah,
we're inquiring about that. What's that all about? So here's how I put this together. Some people, you had Ernest Istook. I think we talked about that. He
Yeah.
came up there with another famous attorney, and they have this conversation with two individuals, talk about coming out full bore. These guys, deputy reserve sheriffs, they have conversations in which both of them say to them, yeah, we knew about this since April 9th. There was a radical Islamic blah, blah, blah group. It's in the bombing report that I'm talking, that was going to try to blow up a government building. Okay. So we have that information. So you have things like this going on frequently, meaning surveillance of radical groups, like some radical Muslims or some radical right wing. How about some radical left wing? You've got that legitimately going on, and you may very well have a governor that has some information about that. Hey, we've collected this information. We're just letting you guys know we're doing X, Y, and Z. It doesn't mean they know everything that's going on or going to take place. It doesn't mean they know everything.
I mean, they could have been possibly, to give them the benefit of the doubt, they could have possibly been briefed that, hey, there could be a possible, attack, explosion in Oklahoma City, and they just happen to be smart enough to put two and two together and call, a place like Walter Reed and say, hey, how would you treat this pressure wave, if there was an explosion? I mean, so that could have possibly happened. I don't, I put it in air quotes for a reason, but I mean,
yeah, because that's a tough one to. Was it foreknowledge or was it research?
Well, here's the thing I really take home for me personally to learn about any of this and all of it. At this point, and at a point like this, I think it's real important to remind oneself that you cannot trust the government. Does that mean we never listen to them? We never take it seriously? We don't look at the information they provide as being plain and legitimate, maybe not some ulterior motivation. No, you always look at all the information. When I go get a physical, I still get one, but I don't trust the medical people anymore either. But as I've had conversations with family members or others, I say, yeah, I get all these arguments against the way things are in the medical industry, but I go get that just as a little snapshot for myself. I get to see what that says. And I think we ought to look at the government the same way. We don't trust them. We don't bow down to them, certainly, but we do those things. We yield to them too much. We need to look at everybody in government as public servants, and make them see themselves that way. If we always see them as the authorities, well, then they're going to start seeing themselves as the authority and act that way.
Let me go back just a second. So this is Oklahoma 405 says, thanks for covering this. Check out my nearly 300 videos on the OKC bombing and its sketchiness. I don't know if you've ever heard of this as Oklahoma 405. That this person is saying that. Then Wendy's asking, a conspiracy within a group within the FBI, they use their authority and then manage to get others to cover it up for them so they wouldn't get caught?
Well, yes, people, yeah, exactly. Like people like James Comey, James, what's the other guys? We could just name them all. Peter Strzok and go down the list. Yeah, people like that. And as a matter of fact, as we talked about before, Merrick Garland was the one that oversaw this, along with a couple other friends of Bill and Hillary.
Yeah, and we've got to remember that, because that is true. And then Lisa says, the only way this all makes sense is if you look at it through the lens of government involvement. Nothing else fits completely. It just does seem, where are we in your presentation?
I think we were just getting into what we call the science. Is that right, David? I mean,
Michael.
Yeah, we're getting ready to go into the bombing. But that I have, you sent me, all those documents. I think you had a picture of a guy, with an American flag. Was that the John Doe that was supposedly with
McVeigh?
With McVeigh at the Ryder truck rental place?
I believe so. I'd have to see it again to say.
Here, I'll flash it up here real quick. I just want to, since we have it, is this who the John Doe was?
No, but that is another person of high interest. And at the point where we're at, I'll just try to be real quick on this. This is Andreas Strassmeyer, also known as Andy Strossmayer, or Andy the German. He was a West German military officer. His father was, all his life, had been a high-ranking person, primarily in cabinet-level work for the West German government. You know, like a Bush or people like that, like a Tulsi Gabbard or something. And then also, his mother was a well-known actress. So they had a standing in the German community. He comes over to the United States, allegedly. The cover story is because I've always been intrigued with American Civil War, and I wanted to go around and visit the sites and blah, blah, blah. Well, what he did is he went around and visited these extreme groups that they refer to as radical right-wing nationalists, blah, blah, blah. And he was, when one looks at this, the long story short is he clearly was here with our government's knowledge at minimum and was functioning as a undercover agent. When we did the Oklahoma City bombing, we fed them all the information that's in our report because we knew that the assistant DAs with that grand jury was not going to do their job. So we knew we had to provide it to them. And as we did that, and we went in and met with the grand jury, and we met with the prosecutors privately in that Oklahoma County grand jury investigation of the bombing, we kept pushing them to get Andy Strossmayer. We knew at that time that the grand jury, that Strossmayer was still in the country, and the FBI had never done anything. And then our people for our grand jury had never done anything. So we're pushing them. You need to subpoena this guy and bring him in and interview him. They wouldn't do it. And then Strossmayer leaves the country through Mexico back to West Germany. He's been interviewed since then, stateside and not stateside, back in those days. And he said some things too that indicate that there was surveillance of the Ryder truck, that there was a transponder or something inside the truck. So they would, again, pointing to prior knowledge and the depth of knowledge. So this guy's real important. He's not actually John Doe, but he is a real important person in this case. There is one other thing I'll say about this, about prior knowledge. We had the informant named Carol Howe, who was actually an informant that volunteered to inform for the ATF on the people in Elohim City. And she was meeting with this guy and others. And in the reports in our bombing, which we have copies of, and this guy right here, Andy Strossmayer, is saying within Elohim City to the other people there, we've got to take our war against the government to a higher level and start assassinating politicians, creating mass public shootings, and blowing up government buildings, end quote. I've said it so many times, I know it by heart. Why wouldn't you?
This dude that was saying that, and he was in Elohim City.
Yep. And we could talk more and more about him and who he's friends with and stuff like that. Watching this interview this morning, and we'll get into the science here in just a second, it made me realize how much, and they touched on this a little bit, how much government informants are out there. They even talked about some real cases where they, somebody was able to enumerate just how many informants, or estimate reasonably how many are out there and how many are just agents fomenting activities that they wouldn't have done, like the Governor Whitmer case in Michigan. When they looked into that alleged assassination attempt, they found out most of the people were informants or agents of the federal government. So we need to be instructed by this stuff and remember it, that there's a lot of that going on. When I first got into this in the very early days, people started just calling me and contacting me from all over the country. I mean, at least quite a few, I'd say 10 or 12 examples of this, where people had been in situations like we were in then, not as anywhere near the magnitude of its public scope, but it was cases where there was both federal and local stuff going on, and the people learned how much the federal government really knew about these cases, and that they actually had people like Andy Strossmayer in the circles saying, yeah, let's go commit these crimes, blah, blah, blah. The whole question is, and there's books been written about this. People have written books about this. These undercover people, would the crimes be committed if they weren't in there inciting and
right?
And there's a lot of that goes on. So
let me interrupt just 1 second, because this is a really interesting point. John Stanley, he's going to be our guest actually on Friday, says, we lived in Kansas at the time of the bombing. The story of how it happened and who helped him was a little different from what we've heard the past 12 years while we've lived in Oklahoma. The strange part that I remember is that there were 2 guys who drove the U-Haul truck from Fort Riley, Kansas to Oklahoma City. So how much of this has been skewed by the media?
Well, the media gets a lot of things right. I can't remember if it was, I'm talking to so many people these days, I can't remember if it was the interview with Tucker Carlson or ours, but people actually say that from time to time, that the media, how much the media gets things wrong. You can be the story or a part of it, and then you go read the media accounts and you think, where were they at? They apparently weren't here covering this, because they get some things so wrong, or they just don't talk about certain things, So there's always that problem.
All right. So where are we now?
Okay. I think we're on the bombing of the science. We call it the science, the bombs, the building. Yeah. We were fortunate to have actually literally some of the world's top experts, and certainly 1 or 2 of them are the top experts in the world. One being now deceased Brigadier General Ben Partin, Partin of Air Force, but he was the government's main guy over the many years that he had all of his education and experience in this area. And he conducted the experiments for the government to determine how do things blow up and how do we blow things up and what works and what doesn't work. And there's a lot of that went on at Elgin Air Force Base, and we include that in the bombing report in some detail, things that they would do. So they know what works and what blows things up and what does not. We also have many examples of terrorist acts that occurred prior to the bombing. And of course, 30 years later, you've got a lot more, in which ammonium nitrate was used as the only or the primary explosive device in an effort like that. So this section covers all of those things. And the long and short of it, the thing that we see, the graphic we see on the screen here, is showing the crater and the relation of the crater size, the depth and the diameter of it tells the experts a lot about what kind of explosive device was used, etc. And so this is the beginning of that, where it shows just a simple demonstration of the crater. I think I've got some other ones, Mike, that also show the crater and the truck sitting up to it. I don't know if you have those up and ready to go, but
is it in the pictures that you sent, or is it in the presentation?
I think it's in the pictures.
Okay, I'll get the pictures.
I'll just keep talking. If you get them, you can pop them up there. But we had a really good, one of our experts was a man named Bob Vernon, and he created that picture you had up there, and the other ones, if we can get them up there. There they are right there. That's Partin's report, and he had a report that we include in our report in the appendix. But that's one of the graphics that he shows. The Ryder truck is, of course, the red center there, and it shows the cutout of the building. This is a top-down view of the Murrah building. And then you can see that what's called the horseshoe shape inside. The problem, the simplified issue with this is you've got that bomb sitting there. First of all, the experts say that an ammonium nitrate bomb could not take out the columns and header beams, period. Can't do it. So if one wants to explore the possibility of maybe they did do that, you can see there on that diagram the ones that came out, including that one deeper in there at the horseshoe.
Okay, sorry. Can you back up a second? So they're saying an ammonium nitrate bomb couldn't have done the damage that happened?
Yes, and here's some examples that we know. Let me show you some examples. In the book, we have Bogota, Colombia. There was an embassy there that had an ammonium nitrate bomb pulled up, and we've got pictures in there, color pictures in the report. You can look at this and read the story about it, or look it up on the internet. They pulled an ammonium nitrate bomb in front of an embassy in Bogota, Colombia. What did it do? It didn't do this kind of damage that we're looking at here. It
Yeah.
blew the face off the building. So imagine a house gets blown out, not blown down, but all you see is the studs and the roof and the skeleton structure of it, something like that. That's what the experts say it can do. Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia is another real famous case. They pulled up a tanker truck full of ammonium nitrate and fuel and pulled it up in front of that building, blew the face off of it, sit there like I just described, a skeletal kind of building, but it did not damage the header beams and the columns. And the reason is because it doesn't have the power. My way of, and I think most people understand this, my way of understanding this, having played with firecrackers growing up, you get a black cat firecracker, and this is a proper example to use. And you lay it next to a paper cup, a paper coffee cup, or a styrofoam cup, and set it off. It's just going to maybe push it a little bit. If you tape it or rubber band it onto that cup and then fire it off, it'll probably blow a hole in it. Same concept here. When they do demolitions, they go inside, they drill into the columns, they put C4 in there or something like that and take it down that way, because you can't just blow it down like they're demonstrating here.
Yeah.
So,
and
go ahead.
This is from General Parton's actual report that he gave to the governor and all the legislators and people like that. Is that right, Charles?
Everyone, yes.
Okay, so he gave this, and just to let you know, Jen, because I read his whole report. So here's the center of that blast, and that's at 5,000 pounds per square inch at the center. So as you move out, this is like I can't remember how many feet each one of these radius in between these lines are. But as you move out, you can see it goes, from 5 to 62 to 18, 7,500, 1,000. By the time it gets to the front of the building, what is it? Maybe 900 something, 600 something pounds per square foot. Yeah. So there's no way that truck bomb in any capacity, other than probably breaking the windows, and messing up some of the facade, no way it could take out, these columns. I mean, when you get out to like some of these columns, like this column is gone. I mean, look how far out the wave is from there. I mean, it's ridiculous. Any normal person, in my opinion, that has half a brain can just look at something like this from a demolition expert like General Parton and say, okay, dumb this down even more for me and tell me, that truck bomb couldn't have caused that. I mean, I don't understand, Charles, how that evidence like this could just be completely just swept to the side.
Well, it's both us and it's and the media and people in government are us too. It's all of us not wanting to deal with the requirements when you discover things like this. It requires somebody to do something, and people are afraid to do something like I did because they might get defeated in the next election, or they might get bombed in the press, and called all kinds of names, or you might lose your job and stuff like that. So you got that problem, and you got the same problem on those that were involved in this, whether they were directly involved or they're just agents and what have you that are observing it. They're not going to speak out for the same similar reasons. It's a fear-based system that gets perpetuated. We'll come after you if you go out. So here's another good view, and this demonstrates a little bit more. B is, according to the experts, is the actual crater, the real crater size that you would look at and determine from a scientific point of view, measuring things and discovering more information. The other two are estimations given by two other entities. First of all, the really big one is, you can see there, the FBI said it's 32 feet wide. So that would give the impression of a much bigger bomb. The one in the middle there, the FEMA BPAT reported, I think I probably mentioned this in the other interview, but after about, I have forgotten the amount of time that went by, but it was probably at least 6 to 8 weeks. The government commissioned a FEMA BPAT, that's for a professional organization of engineers and people like that, to come in to Oklahoma City to write their own report, which of course we have a copy of it in the report, and give their conclusions. Well, when they got to Oklahoma City, they kept them 200 feet away. They wouldn't let them get any closer than 200
No.
feet. They couldn't go touch, examine, take samples, take pictures, nothing. All they got was to see from a distance and anything they were fed by the FBI.
Charles.
Who kept him away?
The government. The government. It's the FBI, the DOJ, whoever.
The federal government.
Yeah, the federal government. They charged them to come there, and then they told them you can only go this far. You can't go up there and actually look at it.
So who came up with the 18-foot actual crater then?
We did. Our people did. Our experts say that's the real crater, and there's photographs you could look at it that are further in our report that you can further look at this and see how the experts determine that. So, I mean, it is somewhat vague, but not in the scientific community. You know, if you're charged with going in and find out what is the size of the crater and what did it, you would use B. But you might say, instead of saying it's 18 feet, you might say it's about 20. It's about 25. You know, you could say that. So I'm not just throwing them all under the bus, but the FBI knew it wasn't 32 feet. They weren't trying to find the truth. They were trying to just manage the whole situation.
Yeah, put out a narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wendy says this too. Wendy says this works within the time frame of the left's constant attempt since Ruby Ridge to disarm Americans and to make them turn against veterans and get them to trust the government. People didn't really trust the government until Reagan. It's disgusting that they'd use foreigners to do this. And then Lisa said 600 PSI knocking down structural beams. That's far less than the bite strength of a grizzly bear. Not possible.
Yep. Yes. So this is just another good illustration that Bob Vernon put together. And again, it just shows another view of the truck and the blast wave radius, and the header beam is there. The header beam is even bigger than most of those columns, and it took that out also. So there's if people that may be getting in this late or something, there's a lot of information about other explosive devices being in the building that went off and that did not go off, that they took out. And
so there were explosives inside the building.
So when you think in terms, I mentioned demolition a minute ago, when you think in terms of going in, if you were going to take this building down and legitimately, you would go inside and you would drill into certain columns and what have you, so that you set them all off at one time and it comes down like a demolition.
Yeah.
Okay. So there were people seen in the building doing suspicious things by people that worked in the building the day and two before the bombing, down in the base, down in the parking garage below ground. So there's a parking garage down there, and people saw, and they said at the time we thought they might be telephone or some other utility company working, doing something like that, you know, with wiring or something. That was their first thought, but Jane Graham is one that comes to mind that she saw that and reported it, among others. But she was kind of suspicious. She said they look kind of suspicious. So people could get in the building and do things. And so, you know, when you have, and furthermore, General Parton, Michael, you've read his report inside of that, either in that report or other interviews that he did over time, he identified very specific places and very specific columns and header beams that were destroyed that would show an intentionally placed brisance explosive device.
Is that why some people reported 2 different explosions?
Well, that's a good question. You know, and then I'm glad you brought that up. The seismic information was very telling. It showed 2 or more events on a seismogram. And
well, it's weird because, you know, Charles, when this happened, I was teaching at Deer Creek High School, and we were right in the middle of a pig final, as a matter of fact. And that at that time, the school was kind of underground. You know, back in the day in the 90s, they thought, in the late 80s, they thought it was a good idea to throw dirt up on the side, like the building was partially underground. And we could feel the explosion all the way in Deer Creek. And I distinctly remember feeling two different explosions because it went boom, boom. It wasn't like a boom and that was the end of it. You could definitely feel at least two, I could, explosions.
Well, and I did too in my office building, which was a few miles west over in the Bethany, close to the Bethany area. I was sitting with a colleague and our secretary, and we were sitting down having a cup of coffee. I was getting ready to go to the Capitol, and it was a small office building. We were right in the middle of it, 2-story, and the landlord had said he was going to put new heat and air systems on top of the building, and they were just telling the tenants. So we're sitting there, we heard this boom, boom, and we said to ourselves, what was that? And then we said, maybe they're putting those new air conditioning systems on the roof today. Then I get a call from my secretary. It said, a few minutes later, it says, hey, I don't know if you know what's going on, but some explosion occurred, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, let's take a break for a second, and then we'll come right back and get going a little bit longer. So that is odd, but I think that the question, that we've got to answer is, how did this, you can almost see it being kind of a government thing. Well, we know that we have these people in Ruby Ridge, and let's embed somebody in there and see if we can't get them to do stuff. I mean, you see it on, they make TV shows about it all the time, and you can figure that it would happen, right? And that maybe the person who goes in as the embed then, ends up getting turned, oh, these guys really are kind of nicer than we thought they were. There's more to them. And then they get turned, and then they themselves become not a government informant anymore, but an actual, member of the, whatever group they were infiltrating. So you can kind of see that happening, but there has got to be an actual explanation as to why in the world this would happen. That you could just suddenly have
just happen, why it was allowed to happen. I mean, obviously it was purposefully allowed to happen, whether someone thought it was going to go to that extent or not, it's pretty obvious someone put bombs inside that building, but did McVeigh and those guys know that? Who actually, that's who we need to get all those questions down to, is who actually had enough knowledge of this deal
to what when
inside that building and blow them up the same time the truck was going off.
But I guess I still don't understand, how does it get that far?
Well, I think the way I understand this is the way I put it together in my own mind to answer that question is you have to have people that are in the government, but they're just like what we see today. We're seeing all this stuff come out with what Trump and his team is doing with Obama and Biden and all those people that did terrible things. If you're paying close attention to that most recently, it's getting more of like the answer to a question like you just asked, Jenny, when they get those emails and those memos that come out, and then you have them actually saying things and talking. There's an inner circle, and they aren't telling everybody else. They may even have, I bet there's some kind of government memos or emails or whatever that relate to Oklahoma City bombing that would answer some of these questions for us, probably.
Well, Wendy says somebody came in, Jenny, that knew about it and used it to do something else other than what the group intended it to do and didn't tell the group what they were doing. Is that what happened, Charles?
Well, it could be. Again, I like to make sure that because I've seen so many people do this over the years, and it's not just about the Oklahoma City bombing and other things. It's easy for us to get on a track and think X is the answer.
Yeah.
And it may very well be. So, I mean, I just like to keep reminding myself and others, we don't know. That's grounds for us having an investigation too, so that we can know, because this will happen again and again and again.
Yeah.
I mean, we may be getting ready to see some more stuff just because of the current climate we're in, that the bad guys don't want more revealed, and they don't want to go to jail or whatever's waiting for them. So they're going to do stuff that lie, cheat, and steal. So we just have to keep remembering that. Now, one thing that I thought of when some others asked questions a minute ago, what's the motivation? What's the reason? I'm not saying this is the reason, but a lot of people ask me this right off the bat in a good period of time. They did it because they were trying to get the anti-terrorism bill passed. There was a bill back then. We think of, and most of us will remember, the Patriot Act. It's something like that, giving the government a lot more power. They could not get that bill passed. It failed easily, multiple times. The Oklahoma City bombing happened. Boom, passed that thing so fast you couldn't even see it happen. Did that have anything to do with it? I don't know, but it's an opportunity, kind of like again, another Clinton guy, Rahm Emanuel. Don't waste a perfectly good opportunity to get something done, in cases like this. Or
never let an emergency go to waste, or yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what a lot of these people think.
Well, and Robert says, when you read all the false flags that have been carried out over time, the government allows these attacks to happen so they can pass laws increasing their power. And he said that right as you were saying, he typed that in right as you were saying that. So, I mean, you do kind of have to wonder, because why? All I know is I wouldn't want to be anybody who has that on their conscience. That's for sure. The death of all those people and the maiming of all those people and the death of children. I don't want that on my conscience.
Yeah, but you're thinking about it from a normal moral person point of view. I mean, a lot of these people, they have kind of that higher globalist mentality. They're thinking, well, for the greater good, we need to sacrifice some of these so we can, get these passed for the greater good. I mean, that's how they think, Jenny.
So I wonder, is there another slide there? Let's see what the next slide shows us. We just talked about two separate explosions. Let's look at that bottom left. Dr. Randall Heather, a terrorism bombing expert. He was on Channel 4. There was another one on another channel, almost exactly the same thing, being interviewed by Devin Scillian and whoever the other talking head was at the time on Channel 4, and they're talking about it, blah, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, and the reports just came out. They found other bombs. They were taking them out, and he talked about that. And he said, this is going to be really good that they found the bombs, because it's going to help us go down a path and find out who did it, et cetera, et cetera. Jane Graham is the person I mentioned that, and Jack Gobin, it's not Gobina, it's actually Gobin, and another guy, Brian, they all were ones that reported to the media as they came out of the building. They said, we felt like we could feel the body swaying or what have you. One of these guys, I believe it was Jack Gobin, said, I used to live in California, was used to earthquakes. That's what I thought it was. I got under my desk, and that's what saved me. Jane Graham was just getting ready to start, scheduled to start at 9 a.m., a computer class for employees in HHS. And the building started shaking. She goes, oh, this might be an earthquake. Everybody better get under their desk. And then boom, immediately it comes through the windows and it occurs. So there was that slight amount of time. But now, as people think about this, if they're not getting the difference between an actual bomb and the ones placed inside, those people that I just referred to, Jane Graham, they were up on the 9th floor, the top floor, and they felt this. it would have been easy. And I was one of these types. I'm not a science person. I didn't gravitate towards those kind of things. So I don't really connect with it that well. If you're up on the 9th floor and that truck bomb goes off, you're not going to have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever number of seconds. You're not going to have any seconds to think about it. You're not going to have time to think about it. You might as well be standing there next to it, because the blast wave from that truck is going to be almost like the snap of my fingers instantaneously.
Right.
So these are what the experts say. I didn't make this up or anything. So what those people were feeling almost certainly had to be, it certainly had to be, not almost, the other devices that were placed in the building that went off and started causing that building to come down like it did. Maybe they
we have no idea who would have planted those devices in the building and why our government, especially our governor, who was in intelligence previously, would lie about it or manufacture a story or not, whatever, however you want to say it.
Well, I don't think Keating probably knew this extent of what they were going to do. I'm certain of that. I mean, you wouldn't spread that out even to somebody like Keating, the former FBI guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a need to know and trust thing. I'm sure. No, I mean, so he wouldn't know about it, but after the fact, why wouldn't you speak out?
Yeah.
Well, if you're the governor, I mean, there's only a small percentage of people that are going to speak out, and some of them are on this podcast right now. You know what I mean? So if you're Keating and you've been FBI all your life and stuff like that, are you going to get up and call them out? Now you're the governor of the state and all this business. That's a gutsy kind of deal. And especially, in the early part of it. Now, if you find out later something's rotten in Denmark, and maybe as time goes on, it's a lot more rotten than I ever thought it could be. When will you speak out? When, if ever? And most people do not.
Well, and I think it's interesting that Robert says Pearl Harbor equals U.S. entering World War II, 9/11 equals the Patriot Act. I mean, going back to what you said about, getting things moving by freaking out the public, essentially.
There's big money in terrorism, Jenny. Big money spent on terrorism, war, all that comes out of all that. All the surveillance state, the amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
I know. And I don't think I didn't really even understand that, Michael, until you turned me on to Killing of Uncle Sam, the book that we talk about constantly on the show. I don't think I even really, I mean, I could say military industrial complex. I could say that term, those 3 words, but I don't think I understood exactly what that meant or how it affected my life until I read that book, and especially Operation Gladio, which was kind of a succession to that book. And you see how the CIA it's like sticking their finger in a pool of water and doing this all the time. It's you're right. Going back to what you said, Charles, earlier on, I think you're just so right over the target with so many things. And the one we were talking about earlier, which is we have been propagandized to believe somehow that government knows best and believe the experts, right? Until COVID. And then I think that red pilled a lot of people, and they went, well, what really is an expert then? Maybe aren't I an expert in some things, like how I want to be treated and what I'm going to do? So I think that kind of red pilled some people, but I think up until that point, that's kind of what patriotism was about, and the flag salute and the Americanism. It's, rah team, which means that we're supporting the team. We're not supporting the individuals. We're supporting the team. And so we all have to be on the same team and go America. And it's sad to say, but I do think that's a propaganda tool for the people who want to use it to their own ends.
Yeah, I think and again, with what's continually coming out in our current time, we're learning more and more about that. And it's one of the best things that could happen to us. I just wonder if we're too dumbed down to really fix it correctly, but we've got some opportunities here, and that's great. It's back to the bombing. Why do we want to even look at this 30 years later for the reasons we're talking about right now?
But
and
that's true.
I remember when 9/11 happened. This was a big point in time because we were waiting for the bombing report to come back from the publishing company that was charged with publishing it. And we were just within, like a week or so, something like that. Or maybe we had just gotten it and we hadn't officially put the press release out that we've got it. We had a lot of press that were waiting for it. Then 9/11 happens. I remember local media coming straight to me like they always did. And they were like, some of them were almost like a little bit nervous, like this 9/11 event happened. And they had asked me a lot of them asked me from time to time, well, why do you keep doing this? Or the Daily Oklahoma would put out an editorial and say, stop doing this, Mr. Key, stuff like that.
Yes, they would.
And I just instinctively said, if we don't do this, it'll happen again. If we don't hold government accountable, these kind of things will continue to happen. Then 9/11 happens. They were kind of like coming back. And I remember one of them, could name who it is, you'd know who it was, said, say that again that you used to say, that you've said before, that we've got to do this or something like this will happen. It wasn't a big deal. I'm just kind of giving a little snapshot of what happened at the time. We can think about if you're in the media, you could get real used to this kind of stuff. I think if you're an FBI agent or a police officer, you see a lot of stuff, including things that probably shouldn't happen, or maybe they're not the most terrible thing in the world, just not following the rules and doing things the right way. You've seen a lot of that, so much that you kind of look past it after a while. And you don't.
Well,
really
it's interesting. Lisa says maybe if more had questioned this, they wouldn't have fallen so easily for the COVID narrative. And she said earlier, people are easier to control when they're afraid. They come on board to any requirements more easily. And that's exactly what they did to us with COVID. And that's exactly what they do to us with so many different things. Well, we have to do this or that or that.
Fear.
And we have to stop acting like Pavlov's dogs and going, oh, okay. Every time they say something. I think the best part of you coming on this show now, even, and all of the things you did, so many years ago, Charles, are there can't only be one narrative.
Yeah.
There can't. Just if you look in universal terms, find me one thing that there isn't more than one explanation for.
Yeah, whenever somebody wants to just stop anyone from speculating about other things, that should be like a big red flag, of flashing lights even. Why? Why is that? Are we just afraid, or are you part of the cover up, or what's the problem here? Why can't we talk about things and not be controlled by the fear or other things like that? Maybe we go to the next slide and maybe it'll jog my memory on some other stuff too.
That's
the seismographs.
Yeah, it's the seismographs. And so there was a big event that took place. We had Ray Brown is the Oklahoma MIT educated seismologist and by other degrees down at OU. I'm sure he's retired by now. But he came out and was on Mike McCarville's KTOK program back in the day. They covered the bombing like crazy back then. This got to be a big segment. What about the seismographs, et cetera, et cetera? Well, government brought in their federal government seismologist. I forget who his name is. It's in the bombing somewhere. And they had a public forum. It was also hosted by the local Association of Engineers and Architects and something like that. So they had this event and they both presented their case, and surprise, surprise, the government guy said, no, it's just one bomb. And what you're seeing there is the building falling down The other events is the debris falling down. And there's been tests since then, and they've also talked about that in terms of, do we see this with other things? Because we take buildings down all the time. So do you see the explosives go off and have an event, and then the building comes down and it's another event? I'm not going to get into that because that's detailed stuff. But no, the answer, the most reasonable, almost certain answer is multiple events. That's what the seismologists say, unless they're paid by the government to come in and say something else. Yeah. We might go to the next slide. There we go. And there's just pictures of the bombing. There's the ones I mentioned, Bogota, Colombia. So that's an ammonium nitrate.
Those are good pictures. I mean, that is a big difference. Wow.
There should be one on Khobar Towers in there. I don't know if it's there. These are experts. I probably mentioned some of these. This guy named Sam Cohen, up there in the top right, the inventor of the neutron bomb. He went to the airport to get on a plane to fly out here to Oklahoma City to be part of the press conference that I held. I had a press conference on June 30th of 95. I contacted the Speaker of the House, the floor leader, the Republican counterparts, and then the governor's office, and said, look, here's what I've been doing. Here's what I think I found out. I'm going to have a press conference at the Capitol. I informed all those people of that. And the people that attended was Parton and who else was there? A couple of other guys that ended up showing up there. One of them was Galen Windsor, was part of the team that created and invented the atomic bomb, Manhattan Project. Okay. He was there. Sam Cohen was going to be there, but the Unabomber, Sam Cohen lives in California. The Unabomber had shut down the LA airport with stuff he was doing back then, so he couldn't get out. So Channel 4 got a hold of the affiliate in LA. They interviewed him, and they ran it all week, or about for like 4 or 5 days through the weekend. Wow. His interview, which he kept saying, I concur with General Parton 1,000%. He's exactly right. And that's what all of them say. This guy named Frederick Hansen, I never met him personally. I talked to him on the phone because he was in Seattle at the time. But this guy, if you look at his resume, he's like, you would think he's the expert. Although General Parton is the one that all the experts said, 2 of them told me he's the expert's expert. Oh, no. But this guy, Frederick Hansen, he taught in universities the principles of blast wave overpressure. Would you like the perfect expert on something like this? So these are experts. We go to the next slide that conclude with the thinking that and there's Khobar. See, now look at Khobar Tower. That is a real similar. You could almost think it was the Murrah building.
Yeah, you could.
But it didn't take any head or columns out. It just blows the face off. I had one expert tell me buildings like that in third world countries, he said they don't have the construction principles like we do. You can take a pencil and dig it into the side of a wall in that building.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's go to the next one. Maybe keep going. There's the crater, but we talked about that already. And we talked about that one.
Talked about that.
Okay, for the federal trials, and this is, back to all the things that would pop up to us and tell us something's rotten in Denmark. Here we are in the federal trials for Timothy McVeigh. The government puts their guy, an FBI agent, inside the crime lab named Lewis Hupp. And he was there to just be the expert with the government to say, yeah, we had however many, it was 3,000, it's going to say on the next page, I think, but 3,000 some odd different fingerprints and palm prints, most of them fingerprints, blah, 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 blah. Didn't say the next thing I'm getting ready to say. It took the defense to say it. The defense cross-examines and they say, now, how many did you take? 1,034. How many of those did you run into your computer database of it was like 35 million? Did you run those through the database to see if there's any matches? Of course they did, right? They didn't even run them through the database to see who they identified.
Wow.
That is like, fire all of them right away. But he did say No, I was given a list of people, which included Terry Nichols' son, who was like 12 or 13 at the time, his ex-wife, people like that. They said, see if these people match up to those fingerprints. So they did not run the fingerprints against the national database to find John Doe number 2. I mean, Tucker and Margaret Roberts talking about that when I watched the interview. What happened with all that they were talking about, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, they obviously didn't want to find them. That's what got me thinking in the beginning of this interview. We've got to stop thinking, well, the government said this, the government did that, because we kind of always default back to that. When you get into a case like this and you see where they're lying through their teeth left and right, I'm not going to give them any benefit of the doubt that, well, the government said this or that. If they say,
well, and I think obfuscation is as bad as lying. And so many governments and elected officials do that kind of thing. And obfuscation has no place in a republic either.
Well, and now we look at this one. Look at that number 2, FBI agent James Carlisle. I'll never forget this one. It was on the Istook case. The 2 deputy reserve sheriffs, I just told that story about Istook. They came up and said we had information about it, radical Islamic group, blah, blah, blah. And then the FBI finally decided, well, we'll go interview these guys now, because when we did our press conference and all that, we said, never even talked to them. And these guys were interviewed, and they said, we kept thinking they're going to get around to talking to us. That's why we finally got a hold of Key and his group, because they never got a hold of us. After that, then they go interview these 2 guys. And I remember David Kokendorfer was one of them. He's a Lutheran minister. After all this, he went into the mission field. I don't know if it had a relationship, but he quit his job and went to the mission field. He calls me up and says, hey, I got a call from the FBI. They want to interview me. And I just went through the interview. There's a guy named James Carlisle. And so Kokendorfer's telling him the story like I always tell it, just like he told me. And Carlisle, the agent, says, well, and he said it with this kind of attitude and this way. I asked him to totally characterize it for me. He goes, well, I'm going to put down that the congressman said blah, 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 something very different, very watered down. And Kokendorfer said, no. And he kind of thought maybe just misunderstood at first. He goes, no, he said, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like he gave the testimony. And Carlisle goes, well, I'm just going to go ahead and put it down like this anyway. And that's, then it was over, and he called me, goes, listen to this. That really got his attention. That scared him. I could tell in his voice how shook he was going through that. So, the surveillance tapes, why would you not release the surveillance tapes of all this time? I submit because it proves 2 things. They were lying, and the other person is probably going to be an undercover agent or provocateur, or whatever you want to call them. That's why they don't want to release that. The middle one, their law enforcement, rescue worker. We've got like 3 different affidavits from credible EMT people where they're having conversations with ATF and or FBI, and they're saying, no, by the way, we've talked about this. ATF weren't in their offices this morning. Now, what does that say? We look at this whole big scheme of things. Well, did they know that something like this might happen? What's going on there? They claim many of them were at a golf event in Shawnee. Well, were every one of them at the golf event? And we know that's not true, because we've got information and pictures and everything of Luke Franey and others down there on the street level. And Luke Franey was down on the street level right after the bombing. It looks like a bomb zone. There's smoke and stuff and debris still flying around, swirling around. And then about an hour and a half later, same guy, Luke Franey, ATF agent, is seen up in the building, sticking his head out one of the broken out windows with a homemade cardboard sign, says, ATF agent, help. His story was that he got stuck up there and he couldn't get down. But he didn't have any debris on his, no dust, nothing. He looked like he had just got up for the day and went out on the town. So where was he? He was not up there. He was not up there. People got out of that area that he was in on their own. but he made a show of it.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next. Let's go to the next one. Missing leg. Who does that belong to? They couldn't allegedly identify it.
Right.
We might go to the next one also. I guess we're at the end. You know, I like probably Thomas Jefferson's probably my favorite founding father.
Me too.
And there's a lot of things that he said. I would rather have too much liberty than not enough. And I think that's what we've got to ask ourselves today. We've gotten used to things being like they are. We're like the frog in the pot. Even those of us like us on this call, people that are listening, you're activists, you know more than the average person, but we all get affected by it. And somehow we've got to communicate that to our fellow citizens, or otherwise wake their sorry, dumb butts up. Excuse me. You can take this clip and send it out there. Maybe it'll make some mad enough to do something. I don't know. But that's our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is our fellow citizens doing this. Yes, sir. Yes, I'll just go along with it. Whatever it takes, whatever you say. And that's in my opinion, that's our biggest problem. If enough people were woke up, then we would vote differently. We would do some things differently. But I think that's our biggest task, is getting more people to come to the ranks of being knowledgeable, and also, again, being knowledgeable, if they ever were in the first place, of this type of government and the system that we have, and why it's so important to restore it and keep it.
Well, it's so interesting to me that you say that, because you've got the Democrats right now saying, you know, Trump is a fascist. I don't know that they know what fascist means. I think we've kind of made so many words, just like in 1984, we're doing the Newspeak thing and redefining words, and the left is really good at doing that kind of thing. But we literally do have elected officials, including Donald Trump, acting like fascists, using the arm of the government to force the people to do something that they needn't do according to the Constitution, probably shouldn't do according to the Constitution. And when you and I, a long time ago, when you and I started looking at the social studies standards, I mean, that was the thing that we really, you know, I remember really kind of brought us together, was the fact that we realized that once you quit explaining to kids how the government is supposed to work under the Constitution of the United States, under the guidelines of a representative republic, not a representative democracy, a representative republic, then none of this, they don't care about any of this stuff. I mean, it's super easy to go, oh, but the government has it all covered. Don't worry about it. Just sit back and collect your check, your Social Security check or your disability check or whatever, and we'll cover it all. And I do think a lot of people woke up during COVID. I think people did. There were quite a few of them who got red pilled, but then the problem has been they don't understand how to make the step to keep that from happening again.
Well, you made me think of that social studies project that we had years ago. And I can't remember if I told you this, and if you remember, it's just a little detail about that. But after so for the listener, we had a bill that was just going to say, that just said schools must teach the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the farewell address, and something else.
Yeah.
Which
a little list.
Yeah, a little list of stuff. And, you know, no biggie, just teach what you're supposed to teach about the country. And, you know, I didn't work it as hard as everything else, but I assumed the Republicans would be on our side, which we were the majority at that time. So we get up, it gets voted down. I immediately turn around and look back at some of my colleagues, the Republicans in particular, and I walk down the aisle, and there's a guy, I won't mention his name on this, but he's one of the good guys from Tulsa. He's what I call probably more like a 70%er, which like James Langford and people like that. You know, they
No,
vote.
James
by a lot.
Langford's more like a 40%er. Let's be honest
Yes.
about that.
Yes, yes, and that's really my real point. Is not the number, but you know, we think they're good because they've got a whatever. They vote
Yeah.
pro-life. Anyway, I go up and as I'm walking down the aisle, a couple of them were kind of looking like, I don't want to talk to Key. You know, they look the other way. They're doing something else. And he did that. And I go up and I said, hey, so-and-so, what happened to you? And he goes, Charlie, I'm sorry. He goes, my superintendent called me and said, we don't want any more mandates. Don't vote for any more mandates. And that's what all of them got. They all got, the ones that voted the wrong way. They got calls from their superintendents. Just vote no on that. It doesn't matter that we're going to teach the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to kids that are getting taught crap today or nothing. And so it would have been an easy vote. It was easy. Even if the superintendent didn't like it and some other educators didn't like it. I mean, really, you're going to get defeated for voting for something like that. So that's how things work. And don't get me started on the stolen government thing, but that's why we need to fix that problem, because it just perpetuates more bad behavior and ignorance and stupidity. That's all it does.
Yeah, we need to hawk your book. Hold on just a second. Let me pull it up here.
This was an affidavit you had in those other documents that you sent me, Charles, from Virgil Steele. He was the elevator guy. Yeah,
there's some good stuff in that one, and the essence of it is, and I won't catch the really good stuff. You really need to read it. This is a private elevator company. This guy worked for them. We worked closely with the man that owned it. I can't think of his name right now. I'll think of it. But anyway, they happened to be there, Midwestern Elevator. They happened to be there at the federal courthouse when the bombing occurred. They were there to also meet GSA. They corporately were going to inspect the elevators in both of those buildings, maybe some other ones for that matter. I don't know. They started in the courthouse. The bombing goes off. They were lucky they weren't in there. They probably would have been killed. But they were able to immediately inspect the elevators and try to get them up and running if they weren't working. And this is the report. But my memory says that he said there's no one in the elevators. As they inspected every one of them, they found no evidence of anyone being in the elevators and fighting their way out, which is what an ATF, the head of the ATF and a head DEA guy that were reported as making comments. They claimed they were in one of the elevators and that they used their martial arts training to knock the door open. This guy says there's no evidence of anybody being in an elevator and getting out in any way. And he said, furthermore, now I may be mixing this up with this affidavit in my verbal conversations with him. Furthermore, there was no evidence of the emergency brakes coming into play, which would have happened. They claimed they were up in the 8th or 9th story and it free fell down, and then they fought their way out. That's what this guy told us. He said, you need to ask them why they don't have any broken bones, much less even be alive. He said most people won't be alive on something like that.
No, they will not coming from a 9th story. And
so it's a
Wendy says, what's number 8?
Number 8, that's what I was going to ask you about, Charles. He says, while in the parking lot of the 2000 Classen building, I looked towards the downtown area and observed a projectile with a trail of smoke behind it streaking through the air in a southeasterly direction from downtown area. I wonder what he saw there.
Boy, I hate to say this, but I do not recall more detail about that. I'm gonna ask Chris Emery is one. He doesn't live here in Oklahoma City anymore, but he's the one that was responsible for that documentary. He's a documentary film producer getting produced called A Noble Lie.
Oh, that's right. A Noble Lie. Yeah.
It's the only documentary on the bombing that you can trust to be truthful and thorough. The rest of them are just rubber stamps.
I'll look that up. I'll put all these links in, like, to your book and everything when I put it up again today. I did want to mention, so Lisa says undercover agents go into their jobs with eyes wide open, knowing the risks. Children and other innocents were murdered that day. Where is their protection and their justice? And Robert says corruption and conspiracies aside, at best, the government failed in their intelligence. And the solution is not to pour more money and power into their agencies, trampling all over the Constitution. That's why I love Robert Scott.
Yep. Well, what was that?
Look at real quick, Charles, like number 27. He said, I observed ATF agents hand carry 3 anti-tank missiles into the elevator, and these missiles were taken into the parking lot of the garage building.
What?
What is that?
That I observed large amounts of cash being removed from the building?
Hey, we've got one from a guy that I know. I got to know him better after the bombing, but he worked for Department of Wildlife. They had a uniform that made him could look like a highway patrolman or deputy sheriff or something. He was off that day, lived in Yukon. The bombing happened. He told his wife, he goes, I'm going down there. He put his uniform on and went down to help. He showed up on the west side of the west side of the building. And as he started walking up to the building, some guy in a suit, and there was a bunch of highway patrolmen in their uniforms and others that were doing some kind of work, transferring stuff into called a van. I think it was just one of those, not a typical van, but a larger type truck. And the guy said, hey, you get up, come here. Called him over there. He goes, help us do this. So he helped them load this stuff up. He said it was rocket and other stuff that might have been like C4 or grenades or something like that.
Well, that's what it said on number 27 on the last slide. Can you put that back up, Michael?
A different guy, but same, and not the exact same story, but similar.
Yeah, because wasn't it number 27 that I observed ATF agents hand carry 3 anti-tank missiles into the elevator, and these missiles were taken to the parking garage of the building. And then 26 was that from my knowledge of weapons and explosives, I observed and assisted the ATF in removing AR-15, M16 assault rifles, several different various varieties of handguns, hand grenades, boxes that were marked explosives, C4 plastic explosives, and at least 3 anti-tank missiles or shoulder hip type rocket launchers and thousands of rounds of ammunition.
To put it in context, that was within the next 2 days. This guy was still helping the ATF because he was getting the elevators in working order. He was helping them to remove all these things from whatever they had.
Yep. I mean, it's just ignorance is bliss.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me throw your book up here so that we can.
It's really, Charles, it's really just mind-blowing to me how the leaders of the state at this time can just, whether they knowingly or unknowingly or whatever, just completely step aside and just let the feds do whatever they want, however they want to do it. Let them spin the entire narrative. Just say, good boy, you just sit down and be a good boy there. Just do what we say. I mean, I can't believe that all the elected officials in Oklahoma, besides yourself and your group, just let those guys get away with this.
Yeah, well, because I think it's just it's too, it's not simple. It's a little bit complicated, but partially because we're afraid, and also because they've been doing the same thing over and over, especially at the legislature. You go up there and you have to fit in, or you will stick out and be treated like a redheaded stepchild at best. Think Mike Reynolds, for example. He raised, whatever the right word is, absolute Hades on them just because they were so bad. But whether you go along, whether you do that or you just don't go along and you speak out, you'll be marginalized. So it's a system that's developed over time and gotten even worse than what it was at a point in the past. I'm amazed now when I go up there and see how our legislators that we elect, good guys, are afraid of the leadership. They don't want to do anything that might look like maybe they're not on the right side, because they got to kiss the rear end. They've got to kiss their rears. Those, to get legislation heard. At the state Republican convention this year, 2 or 3 months ago, I'm walking around, and one of the legislators that was still relatively new, but I'd met in my course of speaking on this subject, stolen government, down in his area. He goes, "Hey, Keith, come here. How's your thing going on the petition drive for that?" We get talking, and he says, "Well, when I first got elected, here's how I described it." He goes, "I felt like I was at a speakeasy going up and knocking on the door, and a little thing comes from a hole and says, and I got to give them a secret a word, and they go, okay, go down the hall to the stairway and go down the stairs, make a left turn, go to the next door and knock on it." And I go do that. Another same thing happens again. I finally get in a room with a few people, and I feel like I got to kneel down on my knee and say, "Would you please hear my bill?" And they say, "Well, think about it." It's out of control, and you get used to fitting into the system just to survive, and it's tricky. But we're not there to make the $47,000 a year plus the extra $20,000 you get in more benefits and retirement, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what a lot of people see. If I can get there, I heard many members and good guys, not that this is the worst thing you could ever say things like, as legislators sit around, we're sitting around waiting for something to happen, nothing going on, and everybody's talking. If somebody might speak up and say, "How long are you going to stay here, Bob?" "Well, I think I'll stay one more term, and then I'll have my 6 years in. I'll be vested in the retirement system." So it's easy to start looking at it for what you can get out of it for yourself. And we've got to put things back in place so that it's not just a matter of getting good guys up there, because good people go up there and they get like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The power is too much. It's too much for them. And so it's not working for us just to get good people up there elected. We can't get enough all at the right time, all at the same time, to really change this. I don't believe. Now, maybe we're in a time where something like that will happen. But
I'm going to suggest that we are, because, you look at what happened. Again, I go back to Jim Shaw, but it's not just Jim. I mean, it's Molly Jenkins. It's Kendall Sacchieri. I mean, there were some, for the first time in a very long time since you and I were together right after the, the Tea Party, because, we had the Tea Party, and that was some big change that happened there. And I haven't seen anything big happen since then. It's all just been kind of on the downhill slide. But since COVID, I've seen these things happen, and I'll give you a really great example. We've had our town government entertain the notion of putting a data center in little bitty Luther. Well, I knew when I was mayor here, people moved to Luther because they don't want to be a city or town like Edmond. They want to be out here and have you leave me alone. And they don't want to be a big town. They don't want to have their kids stay here for jobs. They don't want any of that nonsense. They just want to be left alone. Well, so last night was the town meeting, and several of us went to speak out against the data center, even though they're not really doing anything about it, just to keep it in the, in the conversation so that people don't forget. And then last night, there was a group of people there who were wanting to protest a business that moved into a residential area and then wanted to change the zoning so that they could make that business larger. And the people around them came in and said, "No, we're not. Hey, stop. This was residential. This was agricultural. That's why we moved here. We don't want a business here, or we would have moved someplace, that made that work." I was shocked to see at least half, if not over half, of the people who showed up were 30 something.
Wow. Well, that's
in
good.
their 30s. And when you're 60, you don't want to sound like you're patting people on the head. "Oh, kiddies, it's so good to see you." It's like, shut up. But the point of the matter is that if younger people are are willing to come to a town meeting, give up their evening and come to a town meeting to stand firm for what they want, hey, maybe we're getting something. Maybe we're getting somewhere.
Well, there's no question there's more people, paying attention and that kind of thing, and more people coming to the fight. But, time will tell if it's enough to stop things or whatever. Back to Thomas Jefferson in quotes. My favorite Jefferson quote is, "In matters of power, let no more be heard of confidence in men or man, but bind them down with the chains of the Constitution." And the overall thinking there is follow the rules or else. If you can't follow the rules, we got to get somebody else. We got to vote you out and put somebody in. You got to follow the rules. And that's the problem. People get up there and they fudge the rules and stuff.
Or they want the rules to say, they want the Constitution to say what they want it to say, because then that makes them feel good about something. And I think the immigration issue, you see so many libertarians play the Constitution off to say something that they want it to say that makes them, well, we should allow people to come here and have due process and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're illegal, you don't have due process here.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a citizen. You don't fall under the Constitution. So stop that.
Yeah, another quote that I like about, a lot of people will run away from truth also, And Winston Churchill had a really good one about that. He said, occasionally people will stumble upon the truth, but most usually pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and go on as if nothing ever happened. And I love that one. It might be my number one if I picked one. Actually, there's another one I won't get into because it really cuts to the heart. But yeah, we're all guilty of that, right, from time to time even. So if we don't require our government to follow the rules, they won't. They will not. And we will feel it from time to time. A lot of us won't ever have to experience it, but we'll get the effect of it eventually.
Well, Robert makes a really good comment. I think you'll agree with this, Charles. The feds have taken over state emergency management. The money from the feds have stripped authority from locals and state agencies who have just become federal agencies, basically. And then he says, and the legislature has offloaded their responsibility through government agencies. You and I have talked about that before. The bureaucracy has got to stop.
Well, that's exactly right. And back when you and I were working on that social studies project, back in that same time frame, I was tag teaming with Randy Brogdon in the Senate on the Real ID bill stuff that was coming along. Yeah. And I'll say this real quick. By the way, when you hear listeners, when you hear them say, you got to get your Real ID or you're not going to be able to fly, they've been saying that for 20 years, 20. And some people like us keep getting it put off. And they keep doing this fear mongering. Oh, you're not going to be able to travel, blah, blah, blah. Well, so back when we were doing that, I was going over to Brogdon's office. We were getting ready to have a meeting with the head of DPS and another guy about Real ID and all that business. And Randy stops me just as I come in before those guys get there. And he goes, hey, guess what? I just had a conversation with this one lobbyist who was a former Republican legislator, actually one of the better guys, but he's real well placed. And even at that time, and he basically what he said was, he goes, somebody from the federal Homeland Security let me know that they don't like what you guys are doing down here. Well, I've told that story a bunch before just to draw some mental connects to the way things work. And what you were just talking about, we hear it all the time in the legislature. If you're up there, usually behind closed doors in the private meetings that we have or things like that, you'll hear them more readily say things that reveal they're doing what somebody from up above somewhere is telling them. They may be willing to buck up and fight the governor when they're fighting for what they want in the negotiations, meaning the leadership. But if it's Fed or other things, they're going to do what they're told. So when a crisis happens, this is the thing. And let's say Kamala got elected.
She did several times, actually, but go ahead.
And they're starting to send edicts down to us about fill in the blank. We all fear something like this happening. Are our people going to just manage us, or are they going to stand up and fight? they're going to tend to want to manage us and cover their rear end, save their position and all the benefits that comes with it, and then do what they're told, not just because they're told, but because they are so used to not fighting or whatever. Reasons are, I want people that are fighters, that are principled people. We don't have very many principled people up there anymore, especially in leadership.
No, it's all about who it's about power. You know, I really even think it's about power more than it is money, because once you've got the power, you can make the money. So I think it's all about power. And I think that human nature, well, I mean, so few of us are Christians anymore. And if you're a Christian, you realize that human nature is horrible. I mean, how many times do in the Bible does it say not to trust the heart, right? Because the heart is evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but people tend to think that they're all that in a bag of chips, right? We're our own gods anymore, because we don't need that. The dude in the sky, who needs that, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
So we've come to the point where we are our own gods, and therefore there's nobody we need to worry about but us. And so we can kind of just do whatever we want, and we might say we're Christian, but that's not what we really believe. And it's just so frustrating to me, because I do see a lot of it as just the degradation of biblical principles. Because I'll be honest, I don't care what religion you are. I don't care if you're not religious. I don't care. But if you read the 10 Commandments and you can't say to yourself, hey, that's a pretty good way to live, not doing those 10 things, I think you could probably get a pretty good life out of that. Then there's a problem.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
and Jeremy just sent in a quote there, Jenny, and I agree 100%. You know, all I want is the government to get out of my way. I don't want to be in government. I want to do all my business, live my life, do everything without government intervention, without government control in any capacity. And that's where you get those highly divisive, coercive, deceptive people. They want to control you. And that the only way that they can do it is through government.
Yeah, what he said about religion itself. When we were suing the Stillwater School Board for Bryce, yeah, for his First Amendment rights, I'll never forget. We were sitting in the courtroom, and so the judges, it's the bailiff who does it, right? Help me if I'm wrong. The bailiff is the one who holds out the Bible and says, is that the one, Charles?
I think so.
And says, do you swear on the Bible? Do you just swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And so this guy literally says, I'm not going to swear on that. I don't believe in God at all. I'll just tell you, I'm not going to say that. And I just went, it just broke my heart, because I'm like, number one, I mean, couldn't you at least just keep it to yourself?
Yeah, that would make sense to me. Yeah.
Let's say you're not. Can't you just at least say, okay, whether you believe it or not? And that dude was just like, heck no, I'm not doing that. Ew, gross. I mean, and I'm not naive by any stretch of the imagination, but I have to tell you that I still cannot get that out of my head. He was like a 30-something dude, and I just thought, wow, this is where we are. Help me, Jesus. This is where we are.
Yeah, I've run across a lot of that, had conversations with people, some of them actually kind of close to me. And so the way I look at that is people, we're in times where everything is being questioned.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And so people will tend to, sometimes a lot of us will, when we find out something, maybe overreact to it. And so as a lot of the young people and others have seen things over time, I think they can overreact. And that's what I tell people. when the question comes up, what can we trust and believe? And it has to do with the Bible and spiritual matters. I try to encourage people not to overreact. Keep your mind open and come back, because there's a lot of that going on today, including, kind of the easy stuff like actual church corruptions and things like that. It kind of adds to that. And I think also the church in general is just as guilty as other things we've talked about as a government. We haven't really done the job we should do. And we need to get back to teaching people, young people and others, why Jesus, why love, what's the practical applications of that? What does it look
like?
Why
the Ten Commandments?
What does it look like in government? What does love look like in government? Yeah. And see, people will go off on that and make all kinds of claims, but if it needs to be studied, and by those of us who claim we are Christians and we know it and we're committed to it, we need to have answers to what would the government look like if it was totally run through the eyes of Jesus, love of God, love of Jesus. What would we tax everybody to 100% and just give it out to everybody that needs it? No, we would probably do something along the opposite of that. I'm going off here, obviously, but see, that doesn't fix the problem of fullness, whatever that is, homelessness or whatever.
Yeah.
It steals from those that have and gives to others. It doesn't really have a really good foundation. And that's what we've lost. We've lost so much of our foundational learning, not just from a spiritual point of view, from our historical and political point of view. People are just out there ready to be manipulated. So we got a big job to do. Anyway, I really appreciate being on the podcast today. I could sit here and talk to you guys forever. We could fix every problem in the world.
Sadly, I think we actually could. It's just that the 15 people that listen are the ones that are going to listen. But we've said this over and over again, and I do believe that you believe this, Charles, as well. It's not about us. It's about us instructing others. And even if that just means, just saying something off the cuff in a day, we can't just, stiff arm people. We've got to have these discussions, and we've got to explain what fundamental principles are and how you keep and preserve them. We have to do that. We have to quit locking ourselves in our homes and saying, oh, they're never going to get it, or I'm not talking to them. And we've got to be able to have these conversations. It's the only way we're going to get anything to work.
It's kind of like that movie Back to the Future. We got to go back to what we started with so that we can have a future, because we're not going to have one. It's going to look very pretty if we don't do that.
Yeah. Well, again, Charles, thank you so much for being with us. And I know both of us really appreciate because you've taken some major hits over the years for doing this. And just, I just thank you for your God-given rhino skin. And I don't mean RINO. I mean like a tough skin.
Real rhino. Okay.
That's what I meant. The tough skin. And you just have not let these people get you down, and you haven't let them shut you up, and you're a great role model in that, Charles. And I hope people see that. You really are. I mean, if you've got the truth and you want to know the truth and be open to the truth, you can't let name calling make you sit down. So thanks for that, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for having me.
For Charles, I have a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, Charles, from the great Mark Twain. In the beginning of change, the patriot is a scarce man, and a brave and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yep.
That's a great quote. Well, thanks again, Charles. We really appreciate you, and so happy to have you with us. And thanks. And everybody buy his book and look online, rope2.org. Look online and then I'll have the interview up today with all the links to his books, and I'm even going to put in the links to A Noble Lie so you can watch that, so that it's all out there. So thanks again, Charles. Stay with us if you've got something else that don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll have you back on.
Okay, I'll do it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, bye-bye. I mean, in all honesty, it's true. He has been such a, I mean, he was called names, I think, even before other people were called names. I mean,
well, I tell you, Jenny, it's disturbing the amount of evidence that he and his group came up with.
Yeah.
And still to this day, just go along with the story that they told on the Oklahoma City bombing is just mind-blowing to me. I mean, if I was any position in government whatsoever, I'd say, hey, we're going back to the Oklahoma City bombing, and we're going to tell the true story. We're going to find out what's really going on. We're going to hold every single person accountable that had any kind of knowledge or dealings with this, no matter where they are in the world. We're going to do it right here from Oklahoma. I mean, that's what I do first thing.
Well, and Wendy reminded me, and I'll put this up on as well. Charles is championing the Open Government Initiative, which is basically, openness and transparency and government for the people, of the people, by the people. And so you can find that on his website. But I want to say something, and it won't be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. There is a group mentality, a camaraderie, if you will, among federal agencies, among legislators, among policemen, among firemen. They rally around, one another. And, you look at cops, for example, they have this, we're all a family. We all do. And that's great. And I totally understand, because that's a tough job, just like firefighting, very tough job. But the problem becomes that camaraderie, like with teachers. We've talked about this on the program a lot. How many times have we talked about a teacher covering up for another teacher because they don't want that getting out. They don't want to be the one to say anything. And we're all teachers and we're all in the system, and we can't, break that narrative. That's how so much abuse happens. That's how abuse happens in the schools among teachers.
Look at COVID and all these doctors that just caved in because Fauci said so, or Birx, or the NIH, or whatever. I mean, not all doctors, but the majority of them just went right along, just suppressing our liberty.
This is Jeremy is right. Fraternity. This is what I'm getting at. Thank you, Jeremy Rhymes. This is exactly what I was trying to say. You just did it much better with better word economy. Fraternity over morality. That is the problem that we have. And we've talked about also the caucus thing with the legislators. We've talked about this with legislators who have been newly elected, who have come on the show. Molly Jenkins coughed up all of that stuff. Well, they bring you into caucus and, well, it's us, we're together. No, you are not. You are an individual representing the individual rights and freedoms of the people who elected you in your district. That's who you are. You are not a member of a caucus of legislators. Your only job is to represent the people in your district. That's it. And the only thing you're representing about the people in their district, it isn't the ability of their kids to stay in this state and become employed. That's not what you're representing. You're representing their ability to have freedom, individual freedom, personal liberty. All of that is what it's a very narrow thing, but it's a huge thing, and it matters so much. That's what you're representing. Sorry. John says the same thing. Too true. They cover up too much for each other. If you speak up against one of them, you're all damned by all of them, even though it's truth and they know it. When it gets to the point of covering up evil, we have to remember that we answer only to God in the end, and that would help stop a lot of that. But that's the problem, though, Wendy, is what I just said. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not putting my hand. I don't believe in God. In the courtroom, whatever. Okay. Yeah, and represent the 2,500 that actually voted for you. That's so sad, but it's true, Robert Scott. You know it is. The government's only job is to secure the rights of individuals they represent, period. Amen. Amen. I'm telling my youngest never to pledge to a fraternity in college. Well, I don't know that my sister was a Kappa. And, she was, and my mother was a Kappa, and our grandmother was a Kappa. And I was the only one who was like, not interested in that. I wasn't going to complete that legacy. I know that's shocking to believe. But anyway, it wasn't until, do you remember what happened with the Kappas where they actually allowed a man to come in dressed as a woman? Do you remember that story? You don't remember that?
No.
And that was when my sister went, fine, I'm done. It was pretty bad. Okay. Do you have anything before we get off of here? We're so long.
I think that's it. I think I've said my piece. I do, you know what? I do want to, I'm going to try to contact, we didn't talk about him with Charles, but Terrence Yakey was the police officer.
Who? Say it again. Get closer to your mic. We're still having problems with that.
I gotta change this mic. But
Yeah,
I want to contact
it's
Terrence Yakey's wife, who Terrence was the police officer that was down there, was like one of the first on the scene, saw a bunch of crazy stuff, collected some evidence, and then later, his death was ruled a suicide, but he was like shot, in a very wild way, and then supposedly like went half a mile out into a field and finished, suiciding himself. I mean, give me a break. I know that his wife still does some interviews, so I want to get her on and tell that story because it's literally unbelievable.
Well, yeah, if you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what they say about the Clintons.
Yeah.
How many people did the Clintons know that were suicides that killed themselves? All right. So Friday we have John Stanley on. He's going to talk to us about RFID and EID tags. I was buying some tags for the sheep last night on Premier One, and I noticed that they had scrappy tags, which are RFID tags. And this is something I'm really looking forward to. Well, that's true. Sorry, I got to stick this in. Yep, right. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with John because of some things that I've learned just about being a sheep farmer and how the state will regulate you regarding disease. And we need to have this conversation. I'm so glad he's coming on because I know there are a lot of people who don't deal in livestock. And you live in a city, you live above a restaurant. What do you care about livestock? I'll tell you what you care about livestock. So listen, and then tune in on Friday at 9 a.m. I don't care if you live in a city or not. You still have to eat. You still have to eat something. You still have to put food in the belly. It's got to get it in there. If you're not a vegetarian and you actually like to eat tasty animals, you're not going to be able to do that if we don't stop the government regulating all this stupid crap and nonsense because it's some kind of disease. You, city dweller, need to know about this as well. If you like to eat or you don't want to just eat grass outside your window. All right. So be with us at 9 a.m. on Friday morning as we talk about that. super important stuff. It's not just for us people who raise animals. I promise you. All right. Thank you for being with us. We hope you're having a wonderful August, and we will chat with you on Friday. Oh, thank you. And I'm not putting vegetarians down. I'm just saying, because I like a lot of vegetarians too. The Comanche knew it.
Yeah, there we go.
It was Jeremy Rhymes. This dude. You need to be more of a regular viewer, bud, and commenter. That's awesome. All right. Thanks so much for being with us today. We sure do appreciate you very much. And we will see you again at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. So thanks for being with us. Have a great day. Bye.